This is chapter 1 in patient account. I would be the patient, and I am a nearly 64-year-old female from Pennsylvania. Mast cell diseases. They're rare. They're often misdiagnosed. In case you, the viewer, don't know what a mast cell is, I'll read from the Mast Cell Society. Mast cells are immune system cells that live in the bone marrow and in body tissues, internal and external, such as the gastrointestinal tract, the lining of the airway, and the skin. Everyone has mast cells in their body, and they play many complex and critical roles in keeping us healthy. The positive roles that they play include protecting us from infection and helping our body by participating in the inflammatory process. However, mast cells are also involved in allergic reactions, from the tiny swelling that appears after a mosquito bite to a life-threatening, full-blown anaphylaxis. Mast cells have within them small sacs, or granules, surrounded by membranes. The sacs contain many different kinds of substances called mediators, which participate in all of the roles above, including allergic response and anaphylaxis. The mediators are selectively released when there is an allergic or mast cell-based reaction. Notice that, allergic or mast cell-based reaction. Mark that. Now, Mariana Castles, MD and PhD, is quoted here in the following statement. There's a difference between someone who is healthy with mast cells that are functioning normally and someone with a mast cell disease whose mast cells may be activating inappropriately in response to triggers, or may also be proliferating and accumulating in organ tissues. The latter would be the more severe manifestation of mast cell disease. Mast cell diseases are caused by the proliferation and accumulation of genetically altered mast cells and or the inappropriate release of mast cell mediators, creating symptoms in multiple organ systems. The most benign would be in the skin. Those are called cutaneous. But systemic would involve other organs of the body. The three major forms of mast cell diseases are mastocytosis, mast cell activation syndrome, otherwise known as MCAS, and hereditary alpha tryptasemia, known also as HAT. Mast cell diseases can cause tremendous suffering and disability due to symptomatology from daily mast cell mediator release, meaning if it's happening every day, and or symptoms arising from infiltration and accumulation of mast cells in major organ systems, which at this point in my testimony is a little scary to even contemplate. Although systemic mastocytosis is a rare disease, those suffering with MCAS have recently been increasingly recognized and diagnosed. As a result, patients with MCAS appear to represent a growing proportion of the mast cell disease patient population. It is important to note, however, that the process of mast cell activation can occur in anyone, even without a mast cell disease, as well as in patients with both mastocytosis and MCAS. There's various manifestations: cutaneous mastocytosis, CM, systemic mastocytosis, SM, and mast cell sarcoma, and can occur in both children and adults. Here's my story. From my earliest memories as a very young child, I would get hives. Hives. On my face, on my neck, on my bodice, on my body, on my back. Sometimes they'd be isolated. I was too young actually at the time to be able to testify now as to how many I would get and how frequently and how proliferated. My mother has passed away. I can't consult with her or anyone to confirm just how proliferated they were. But I did have right here on my cheekbone for many, many, many years a brown, round spot, which when rubbed would puff up like a mosquito bite, and which, right before a hive outbreak, would also puff up. Dr. Roland Miller, who was the local general practitioner of note when my generation was young, puffed on his pipe with his great big belly behind his desk. He told my mother that this spot was a collection of hive cells. To the layperson, that really is not very revealing. What would a collection of hive cells be? Is there such a thing as a hive cell? No. What he was really trying to tell my mother was that this was a collection of mast cells. You'll note that there is no more any evidence of that brown spot on my face. It disappeared over time, and I don't know why. So did the episodes of hives as I grew. I don't remember any episodes in high school, college, or young adulthood, but once I hit 40, whatever, early 40s, post the swine flu vaccination, by the way, and post the manifestation of various other allergic responses like hay fever, I started having hive outbreaks. I also started ingesting soy products for the first time in my life, soy milk and other products containing soy, because in the early 80s, soy began to be used ubiquitously, especially in restaurant food. And I was a restaurant waitress, so I was consuming foods that contained soy protein. Not deliberately, just because it was always there. I had 4 outbreaks of hives in 1 year's time, each of which sent me to the emergency room in near anaphylaxis, epinephrine in the arm, Benadryl. The 2 most frightening episodes were after I ate a hand-tossed pizza that contained hydrolyzed soy protein in steakums, soy protein in a garlic oil, which was mostly soy, and the live gluten in the hand-tossed crust. I remember driving the wrong way on one of our major thoroughfares, Peach Street, in the dark to get to an emergency room quickly enough, even though I was on my way to the movie theater to meet a friend. I never made it. I ended up in the emergency room. They would start on my face, the nerve periphery, and on my neck, and then down in here, bodice, and then eventually to my back. Sometimes they'd start on my back. The second most frightening episode was during a test at Indiana University of Pennsylvania during the summer. I was attending a workshop on geography, and I was taking the final written test, and I started an outbreak in the middle of the handwritten test, and I begged someone for any form of Benadryl, and somebody gave me a tablet, a gel cab, half of which contained the dye, because at the time I thought it was dye. I thought I was reacting to red dye or various dyes, which may very well have been the case, but a girl gave me a tablet that had a dark green dye in it, and my outbreak became worse. I ran to the infirmary. I had to leave, because they were on my back. I had to leave the test. I ran down the campus of Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, which is hilly down in the valley of Pennsylvania. I ran as fast as I could to the infirmary, and the act of running raised my blood pressure, my heart rate. By the time I got to the infirmary, I was in really crisis state. I had them all over my body, and they had to treat me there with massive epinephrine and Benadryl. And I remember on the ride home from Indiana, Pennsylvania, which was a few hours, I slept the whole way. My colleague drove us both, and I was out cold for the entire trip home from all the Benadryl and so forth. I had blood work done, local doctor Doros Michaelides. He noticed that my soy, gluten, and wheat were very high, over 1,000, I think, for gluten and wheat. So he determined that I was reacting to gluten and wheat and soy, but later my skin tests at the allergist would prove that I was not allergic to soy. Yet I reacted to it in a dangerous way. Then, backtrack, Michaelides. So Dr. Michaelides decided that I had mastocytosis, and I had never heard of this before, and I would say that the year was probably 2000. He put me on these liquid vials that came in plastic little containers that you'd snap open, and he said, pour this into a glass of water 30 minutes before each meal. That wasn't manageable. I was teaching school, elementary school. A couple times I would take that vial of liquid too close to the meal that I would actually consume, and it would send everything right through me, and was embarrassing. I had 2 episodes, once on a sailboat that I'll never forget. It's pretty gross when you take medicine at the wrong time that's supposed to impact your digestive system. So he said I had mastocytosis, and that was, 20 years ago. I bailed on that protocol, and I stopped seeing him as a physician and continued to manage my reaction to soy with avoidance, and also was since thereafter diagnosed with gluten intolerance by Kenneth Fine of Baylor University through a sample I sent in the mail, fecal sample, and a mouth swab. He said, you have the allele for various autoimmune disorders, one of which is gluten intolerance. So I went strictly gluten-free from my early 40s up till the current moment. And I also avoided soy at all costs. But every time I consume soy accidentally or unwittingly, I start getting hives. I immediately take the Benadryl, or I drive to the parking lot of the emergency room just to be sure that I don't react further. Facing the coronavirus pandemic and the vaccine, I have been addressing anaphylaxis pretty much daily for the past month. And the closer I get to inspecting my history with anaphylactic reactivity and visit Dr. Philip Gallagher, local allergist, and get blood work and get evaluated, and the closer I get to revisiting mast cell disease. I have a cafe au lait spot on my thigh. I've had it all my life. Recently, I discovered that if you rub them, and you see redness or urticaria or purpura, meaning blood. Anyway, I just did that this morning, and I took a picture of it. Yeah, that cafe au lait spot does react. That's a marker for mast cell disease. So, it remains to be seen. My tryptase levels were just tested the other day via blood draw, and we'll find out in a few more days whether my tryptase levels are elevated. That's another marker. You can pretty much be diagnosed with this by the process of elimination. and various testing markers. So far, I've got the skin marker. I've also got a mark right here on my face that has appeared in recent months. And I thought it might be an early melanoma because my mother had melanoma. But I do note that when I rub that, it gets darker. So that's newly appearing. And mast cell disease is marked by brown skin lesions which either itch or are raised or react in some way. In my case, it's been hives, hives, and hives, leading to anaphylaxis. So this being chapter 1 in my testimony, we'll be letting you know in chapter 2 and however many chapters follow. To those of you who have mast cell disease and have been coping with it for a long time, whether cutaneous, indolent, systemic, or serious, I hope to meet all of you and at least find my people. Because I'm really, really tired of people making fun of me, calling me hyper anxious, telling me I need to smoke a joint and relax. Try living in my body for a couple days, or a lifetime. Thank you for viewing this testimony.